When you feel alone, it often seems like your existence has gone unnoticed by the world. The room is silent. The phone doesn't ring, your footsteps echo with no reply, and your prayers seem to hit the ceiling and fall back down unheard. You might sit at the edge of your bed or walk beneath a grey sky, wondering if anyone truly knows what you're going through. The people around you may speak with cheerful voices, share photos of their joy, and carry on with laughter, while you carry an invisible weight no one sees. This is the nature of isolation. It convinces you that your pain is meaningless unless someone acknowledges it, that your suffering is empty unless someone offers to share it. But the quiet truth that rarely gets spoken is this: just because people do not see you does not mean God does not. In fact, He often draws closest when others draw away. God is not limited by human senses. His presence is not measured by the volume of a conversation or the frequency of companionship. He does not need a crowd to take interest, nor does He wait for others to validate your pain before He tends to it. His nature is entirely different from ours, where we are easily distracted by noise and performance. He is attuned to the heart. When no one calls to check in on you, God does not forget. When others are too busy to notice your tears, He sees each one fall, even the ones you never let escape. This is not a poetic sentiment. It is a divine reality. His gaze is not bound to time or location. Whether in a crowded marketplace or a lonely bedroom, He is just as present, just as observant, and just as concerned. The world teaches us to measure importance by visibility. If you're noticed, liked, or praised, you must matter. If you're hidden, quiet, or struggling, you must be lesser. But God's ways reverse this order. His eyes fall on the sparrow, a tiny, insignificant bird in human terms. He counts hairs on our head, not to impress us with His power, but to show how deeply He cares. This kind of attention is not casual. It is intimate. It means that even in your loneliest moment, God is fully aware of what you're enduring. Not vaguely or distantly, but with the full force of divine empathy. People may walk past you, scroll past your story, miss the signs of your inner battle. That does not mean your pain is small. That does not mean your journey is meaningless. Sometimes the most sacred seasons of life are the ones spent alone, misunderstood, uncelebrated. That is when you begin to understand who God really is. Not just the God of miracles and blessings, but the God of shadows, of silence, of stillness. He does not flee from discomfort. He dwells within it. He does not shy away from your loneliness. He steps into it with you. There is something holy about being unseen by the world and yet known fully by God. It strips away the pretense. It quiets the noise of performance. It forces you to ask, "Is God enough for me?" even if no one else notices me. And it is often in that question that the truest answers are found. You begin to realize that His presence is not a consolation prize. It is the treasure itself. To be seen by Him is not a backup plan. It is the original promise. Even in the absence of people, you are not abandoned. Your life is not hidden in obscurity. It is held in divine attention. The presence of God in the absence of people is not merely a substitute for community. It is a foundation deeper than human support could ever offer. You may ache for someone to understand, someone to speak the right words, someone to just sit beside you and say nothing. And sometimes God sends those people. But other times, He becomes that person himself, not in some vague, spiritual sense, but in a very real, present, sustaining way. His nearness becomes your comfort. His watchfulness becomes your assurance. You may be walking a path that no one else sees, bearing a weight no one else knows. But you are not forgotten. You are not invisible. Heaven watches, not from afar, but from within your very breath. The one who made you still walks beside you, not in theory, but in truth. He sees all things, and in that seeing, he stays. There is a kind of pain that silences even the most talkative soul. It is not the kind of pain you can explain to others, not because you don't trust them, but because words simply fall short. There are no metaphors precise enough, no sentences long enough, no language deep enough to fully express what you feel. You may try to speak it aloud, but the moment you begin, you realize that even your voice cannot carry the weight of what your heart knows. This is not mere sadness. It's a sorrow buried so deeply that it lives below language. And in that place, where vocabulary fails and silence takes over, there is still one who listens. God does not require words to understand the soul. He does not rely on the sentences we form to gauge the depth of our pain. Human communication may depend on speech, on clarity, on carefully formed expressions. But divine understanding surpasses that. God listens in a different way. He hears in silence what others cannot even hear in shouting. He knows the difference between a word withheld and a word forgotten. When your lips tremble and nothing comes out, that is not nothing to him. It is the cry of your spirit, and it is heard. Many believe prayer must be spoken. That connection with God requires specific words or perfect expressions. But the truth is, the most powerful prayers are sometimes the ones that never escape the heart. A sigh, a tear, a moment of stillness where you look toward the ceiling, unsure if you're hoping or just surviving. These are prayers. These are the signals of a soul stretched thin but still open. God does not miss them. He hears the prayer in the breath you take when you're trying not to fall apart. He hears the meaning in the pause between your thoughts. He understands the pleading buried in your silence. In human relationships, silence is often misinterpreted. People assume that if you're not talking, you're fine, or worse, that you're uninterested. But with God, silence doesn't create distance. Silence, in fact, can be the most sacred ground between the soul and the divine. When you have nothing left to say, that is sometimes when he draws the closest. Because he doesn't need your articulation. He needs only your truth. And your truth can rest quietly within you and still reach the heart of God. Pain has its own language. It speaks through the tension in your shoulders, the weight behind your eyes, the emptiness in your laughter. People around you may miss these signs. They may not notice the change in your tone, the slow withdrawal, the way you linger longer in thought. But God notices. He doesn't just notice, he interprets. Where others might only see silence, he reads it like a book. He is fluent in suffering, fluent in longing, fluent in the language of the soul. The silence of your pain is not silence to him. It is a language he hears with perfect clarity. This is a truth that anchors the weary, even if no one else understands, even if you have no way to explain, even if the words catch in your throat or never form at all. God is still listening, and not just listening. He is understanding. He is not confused by your silence. He is not waiting for you to explain yourself. He already knows. He knew before the silence, during the silence, and long after it. Sometimes we stay silent, not just because we don't know what to say, but because we are afraid no one will understand. We don't want to be misread. We don't want to expose our vulnerability and be met with confusion or awkwardness. But with God, there is no risk of misunderstanding. You don't have to explain yourself to be understood. You don't have to speak perfectly to be heard. Your silence is not a failure in prayer. It is a form of it. It is a sacred offering, a vulnerable truth, a raw and honest space where only God can enter. In the quiet moments when you feel like no one knows what you're going through, remember that God does. Not from a distance, not in a general sense, but with detailed, tender understanding. He hears you, completely, lovingly, patiently, even when you say nothing at all. Pain is not just something we survive. It is something that shapes us, even when we wish it wouldn't. In the quiet hours of suffering, when no one sees and no comfort seems to come, something invisible begins to form inside the soul. It does not announce itself with a trumpet or make grand declarations. Instead, it works slowly, almost secretly, in the deep places where pride cannot reach and where noise cannot distract. That's where pain does its most powerful work. Not in the moment of agony, but in the long, drawn-out H that forces you to sit still and examine the contents of your heart. Most of life teaches us to avoid pain. We numb it, run from it, ignore it, cover it with distractions or noise or applause. But there are moments when it comes anyway, uninvited, unwanted, and unstoppable. And when it arrives, it strips away everything extra. The masks fall, the distractions fade, the noise dies down. What's left is the raw, unpolished soul facing questions that once lived in the background. Who am I, really? What do I truly believe? What endures when everything comfortable disappears? In the absence of ease, our deepest truths begin to surface. Pain, though cruel at times, becomes a quiet teacher. Not the kind that shouts or forces, but one that waits for you to stop resisting and simply pay attention. It doesn't give lessons quickly. It doesn't offer answers right away. It simply invites you to go deeper, into your faith, into your doubts, into your hidden fears and silent hopes. It challenges everything shallow. It refuses to let you settle for surface, level beliefs or second-hand convictions. It insists that you wrestle, that you question, that you learn what it means to stand when there's nothing holding you up but the invisible hand of grace. There's a kind of growth that only comes in the valley, a kind of maturity that only takes root in darkness. The mountaintops are beautiful, but they're not where roots grow. Roots require stillness, pressure, depth, and those conditions are often created by sorrow. You don't develop resilience in comfort. You don't discover the strength of your soul when everything is going your way. You discover it when you've been bent, broken, humbled, and yet, somehow, you're still breathing. You're still praying, even if the words don't come. You're still believing, even if your faith feels fragile. That is strength. That is growth. That is what pain teaches. There is a sacredness in suffering that can't be imitated by success. It reveals things nothing else can. It shows you what matters and what never did. It separates the essential from the unnecessary. In the darkness of pain, you learn to listen differently. You begin to notice whispers from God you missed in the light. You see people more clearly. You understand compassion more deeply. You realize that some of the most beautiful souls you'll ever meet are those who have suffered quietly and come out softer, not harder. This is not to say pain is good in itself. It is not romantic or desirable. It wounds, it scars, it leaves marks. But in the economy of God, even pain is not wasted. He does not cause every hurt, but He can use every hurt. He can build something from the rubble. He can shape character from the broken pieces. What felt like loss can become the foundation of a new kind of strength. One that does not pretend. One that does not perform. One that does not need approval to feel secure. It is the kind of strength that knows what it is to weep and still hope, to break and still believe, to lose and still love. Loneliness sharpens that process. When you're isolated in your pain, you begin to lean on God not out of duty, but out of necessity. There's no one else to impress, no one to save face for. It's just you and God. And in that silence, something holy can begin. A quiet fellowship with the one who knows suffering better than anyone. The one who walked through agony alone so that you would never be truly alone in yours. He meets you there, not to pull you out immediately, but to teach you how to stand in the fire without being consumed. Pain is a difficult teacher, but in its classroom, the soul learns how to become unshakable. In this world, being seen often equates to being valued. If your pain is visible, people may respond. If your struggle is loud enough, it might draw sympathy. But the most intense battles are often the quietest. They're fought in silence, behind closed doors, with a smile on your face while your heart trembles inside. And because those battles are not public, people assume they don't exist. They walk past you with assumptions, not malice. They interpret your calm as peace, your silence as strength, and your ability to carry on as a sign that everything is fine. But hidden pain is still pain. Invisible wounds still bleed. And just because no one around you sees the weight you carry, that doesn't mean it isn't heavy. The fallacy of earthly visibility is that it depends on human perception, something fragile, easily distracted, and often superficial. We see what we want to see. We notice what makes noise. We affirm what impresses us. But God does not look at the surface. He is not impressed by performance, nor distracted by image. He sees what is hidden from every other eye. His attention is not limited to what others highlight. He sees in secret, in silence, in solitude. The things no one else applauds or even acknowledges are fully visible to Him. Every unnoticed sacrifice, every silent cry, every internal surrender that no one else knows about. It is all laid bare before Him. There is something deeply comforting in knowing that God's sight is not like ours. People forget. People overlook. People assume. But God sees not only your external actions, but the motives behind them. He sees not just the decisions you make, but the struggle it took to make them. The tears behind the obedience. The fear behind the courage. The exhaustion behind the perseverance. In a world that often rewards performance, He honors authenticity, where humans wait for results to assign value. God treasures the hidden wrestlings that no one else ever hears about. You may go through seasons when no one understands your burden. They may see you functioning and believe you're fine. They may hear your laughter and miss the fatigue in your soul. But God is not fooled. He doesn't miss the sigh that escapes when you're alone. He doesn't ignore the nights you lie awake, or the moments you hold back tears because you don't want to explain them. Every piece of your internal world is known to him, not as data, but with tenderness and compassion. He sees without judgment. He observes with mercy. He doesn't need you to make your pain visible in order to validate it. This is what makes divine vision different from human sight. Human sight is conditional. It's limited by bias, by mood, by attention span. But divine vision sees into the marrow of your life. Where others see strength, God may see strain. Where others see your ability to keep going, He sees the prayers you whisper just to get through the next hour. And in that awareness, He is not passive. He doesn't just notice, He cares. He moves toward you, even if you don't feel it yet. He supports you in unseen ways. Sometimes He strengthens your heart without removing the weight. Sometimes He brings peace in the middle of the tension, not after it. It is tempting to believe that what is hidden is forgotten. That because no one asks, no one cares. That because no one helps, you are alone. But that's the lie the world tells, the lie that equates visibility with value. In truth, some of the most precious work of the soul happens in obscurity. The private acts of integrity. The prayers said when no one is listening. The choice to forgive when there's no applause. These are the things that heaven honors. These are the quiet victories that echo in eternity. Being unseen by people does not make you invisible to God. Being misunderstood does not make your pain invalid. Your suffering doesn't require public proof for it to matter. There is no need to shout your sorrow for it to be heard in heaven. The divine eye does not miss. The divine heart does not forget. God's vision cuts through the surface and meets you at the level of your spirit. Where others pass by, He stops. Where others overlook, He sees. Where others forget, He remembers. The fallacy of earthly visibility may cause others to miss what you're carrying. But God never does. He sees it all. And in seeing, He holds you. There is something deeply unsettling about waiting in silence. Especially when you're in pain, when you're praying with all your might, and when you're desperate for any sign that your cries have been heard. Time stretches long in those moments. Minutes feel like hours, and days feel like years. You pray once, twice, again and again. And still, there's no sign, no shift, no voice from heaven to break the stillness. In such times, it's easy to assume God is silent because He is distant. It's tempting to believe that your prayers are going unanswered, or worse, ignored. But that assumption comes from measuring God by human standards, forgetting that He operates not from urgency, but from eternity. Human beings are often in a rush. We live by clocks and calendars, expecting quick results and instant feedback. We expect that if we speak, we should hear back. If we move, we should see progress. If we pray, we should receive something in return. Immediately, clearly, visibly. But God does not live inside the limits of our time or emotional urgency. He is not delayed, distracted, or forgetful. He is deliberate. Every move He makes is measured in eternal wisdom, not earthly panic. His silence is not neglect. It is often preparation. It's hard for us to comprehend this because we associate silence with absence. When people don't reply, we feel ignored. When no one responds, we feel unimportant. So when God seems quiet, we apply the same logic and assume we've been forgotten. But divine silence is not human neglect. In fact, silence may be the very evidence that God is listening more closely than we realize. While we cry in the now, He listens from beyond time. He is not reacting. He is responding. With perfect knowledge of both what we ask and what we need, and of the exact moment in which it will be right to act. God's listening is not passive. It is not the kind that hears and forgets. It is the listening of a master craftsman who takes in every detail and then begins shaping things behind the scenes. We may not see it yet, but He is working in hidden places. While we are pleading, He is aligning. While we are asking, He is adjusting pieces we don't even know exist. What seems like a delay is often a divine orchestration of timing so precise we wouldn't believe it if we saw the full picture. But we rarely do. That is the nature of faith, to trust even when the process is hidden. It is comforting to remember that God does not panic like we do. He does not grow nervous when things take time. He does not rush to meet our deadlines. He remains still, not because He is indifferent, but because He is certain. Certain of His power, certain of His purpose, certain of His love for you. And in that certainty, He is patient. He knows what you're waiting for. He knows how much it matters to you. But He also knows what kind of transformation must occur in the waiting. Waiting is not passive suffering. It is often the place where your faith is refined, your endurance stretched, your perspective deepened. Sometimes what we need most is not the answer to our prayer, but the strength to keep praying even when nothing changes. That strength does not come from ourselves. It comes from the quiet presence of God, holding us up even when we think we're standing alone. We might not hear His voice, but we feel His grip. We might not see His plan, but we sense His peace. And that peace isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a whisper in your heart reminding you that you're not forgotten. That even now, in the silence, you are being shaped for what's coming next. The patience of God is not a flaw. It is a gift. Because it means He's not acting out of pressure, but out of love. He is not answering just to relieve your discomfort. He is answering in the way that will produce lasting growth. What you think is silence might be the space where God is doing His most important work, not just around you, but within you. He is not late. He is never early. He is right on time, because He lives outside of time. His listening is eternal, and His timing is perfect. Hope is often misunderstood. People think it always looks bright, feels strong, and sounds like certainty. They expect it to shout from the rooftops, to fill rooms with light, and energize the heart with an immediate burst of clarity. But real hope, especially the kind that comes during pain, is rarely loud. It doesn't always march with confidence or dance in the daylight. Sometimes, it's a quiet breath you take in the middle of despair. A flicker rather than a flame. A choice to believe, not because everything feels right, but because you've decided that God's presence is still enough, even when nothing else makes sense. When you're suffering, the absence of answers can feel overwhelming. You may not see the purpose. You may not know how long the pain will last. There's no visible rescue plan unfolding, no sign in the sky, no angel at the door. It can feel like you're sinking in a sea of questions. But even there, even in the depth of that unknown, something begins to stir. It's not always emotional. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it comes in the smallest form, an inner stillness, a quiet refusal to let go of what you know deep down to be true. That's what hope looks like when it's been tested. That's what hope looks like when God is the one holding it for you. This kind of hope doesn't deny pain. It doesn't pretend everything is fine. It doesn't slap on a smile and call it faith. It's honest. It admits the darkness, but insists that darkness is not the end. It remembers the character of God even when his silence stretches long. It clings to the past moments where he was faithful and uses them as anchors in the present. It chooses to believe, not because the outcome is guaranteed in human terms, but because the heart of God has already been proven. What makes hope sacred is not that it brings immediate relief, but that it endures without needing constant evidence. It draws strength from trust, not from circumstances. It doesn't require you to understand everything. It only requires you to hold on to the one who does. That kind of hope is quiet, but unbreakable. It survives the crushing weight of sorrow. It hides in the prayers that feel empty, but are still whispered. It dwells in the simple decision to get out of bed, to keep moving, to keep breathing, even when everything feels heavy. There are moments in pain when you realize the miracle is not the escape, it's the endurance. The fact that you're still standing, still breathing, still choosing to trust, even if barely. That is a miracle in itself. God doesn't always take the storm away. Sometimes he walks you through it. He doesn't always remove the pain. Sometimes he strengthens your heart to carry it. And in that strength, hope finds a home. It lives in the resilience of a soul held by grace. It lives in the silence that is not empty, but filled with the presence of God. Hope is often unseen by others. People may not understand how you're still going, why you haven't given up. They might not know the battles you've fought alone, or the quiet tears you've shed when no one was watching. But heaven sees it all, and in God's eyes, that quiet endurance is precious. It is not overlooked. It is honored. For every moment you chose to trust him without seeing the full picture. For every time you whispered his name even through the H. For every time you kept going when you had every reason to stop. Those moments are not wasted. They are building something inside of you that cannot be destroyed. God often doesn't show up in the ways we expect. He doesn't always send signs or visions or dramatic answers. Sometimes he simply sits with you in the dark, his presence wrapping around you like warmth in winter. He doesn't need to shout. His nearness speaks volumes. In that nearness, hope is born, not loud but deep, not flashy but firm. And once it takes root, it grows even in the harshest conditions. Even when the rain doesn't stop, even when the sky doesn't clear. Hope grows because God is there, and where he is, life always finds a way. This is the kind of hope that remains, not because everything is okay, but because you've come to trust the one who never left your side. Even in silence, even in pain, even now. When all the noise fades, when the crowd is gone and the silence becomes heavy, it's easy to believe you've been forgotten. But that is when the truth shines brightest. You are not alone, and never were. The pain that no one sees, the battles you fight in secret, the tears that never fall, none of it escapes the gaze of the one who formed your soul. God sees everything, even what the world ignores. He hears the silence of your suffering as clearly as a shout. And in that silence, He is not absent. He is working, shaping, strengthening, and holding you. You may feel abandoned, but heaven is watching. You may feel unheard, but God is listening. You may feel weak, but even now, He is giving you the strength to endure. The hope that sustains you might not roar like thunder. It may whisper, but it is real because it comes from the one who never fails. Let that truth settle deep within you. Your loneliness does not define you. God's presence does, and in that presence, every silent cry, every hidden scar, every weary step is known, loved, and carried. What if the loudest cries are the ones no one hears? What if your deepest pain speaks in silence, and yet someone hears it perfectly? There are moments when you feel like you're disappearing, unseen by the world, unheard by the people around you. But in that invisible ache, something sacred is happening. Because even when the world is silent, God is not. He sees everything. He hears even the silence of your pain. And that changes everything.